The house that wouldn't bend. The notification lit up my phone at 2:14 p.m. Mountain Time. Motion detected. Front door. I was somewhere outside Moab, Utah, Red Rock Canyons, 0 cell service for 4 days straight, finally getting Wi-Fi at a gas station that smelled like burnt coffee and regret. Julia was inside buying trail mix. I was checking emails when the security app pinged again. Motion detected. Living room. Camera 3 interior active. Camera 3 only activated if someone opened the front door and triggered the motion sensor inside. Someone was in my house. I tapped the feed and felt my throat close. A man in a blue jumpsuit Locksmith logo on his chest stood in my entryway holding tools. Behind him, gesturing like she owned the place, was Karen Hunt, blonde bob, designer blazer, clipboard in hand, president of the Woodbrook Park HOA, the woman who'd been sending me threatening letters for 6 months. And she was walking through my house in North Carolina while I was 2,000 miles away watching it happen in real time. "Julia!" My voice came out strangled. "Get out here. Now!" She appeared, trail mix forgotten, and looked at my phone. 2 more people followed Karen inside HOA badges around their necks, like some suburban SWAT team. Clipboards ready, cameras snapping photos of everything. My living room, my kitchen, my family photos on the wall. Then Karen walked into my office, opened my desk drawers like she was shopping at a yard sale, picked up documents, tax records, personal files, things that were none of her goddamn business. And then, God help me, she opened my laptop. "She's touching your laptop," Julia whispered. I couldn't speak. I could only watch as Karen Hunt committed multiple felonies on camera while a locksmith she'd lied to stood there looking uncomfortable, and 2 HOA lackeys documented my entire life. They spent 17 minutes inside. When they left, they stuck a bright orange notice on my refrigerator. Non-compliant property. Subject to fines and enforcement action. Pre-printed. Laminated. Like they'd planned this for weeks. Julia grabbed my arm. "Tom, we need to go home, right now." But I was already booking flights, because Karen Hunt had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and I was about to make damn sure she paid for every second of it. My name is Thomas Bridger. I'm 41 years old, architect. 15 years designing buildings that don't look like every other suburban box. 2 years ago, my Uncle Richard died and left me his house. Not just any house, a tall, angular structure with green metal siding, double-gabled roof, and more personality than the entire cookie-cutter development next door. He'd built it himself in the 70 seconds, brick by brick, fought off the HOA for decades, and made me promise something before he died. I can still see him in that hospital bed. Oxygen tubes, voice barely a whisper. "Tommy, that house, they'll come for it. The HOA, they always do." Tried to take it from me a dozen times with fake documents and legal threats. But it's ours, not theirs. You protect it. You hear me? You protect what's yours. I'd promised. And now, watching Karen Hunt violate that promise on camera, I felt something in my chest ignite. This wasn't just trespassing. This was war. We landed in Charlotte at midnight. Julia went to her sister's. She needed sleep, and honestly, I didn't want her seeing what I suspected I'd find. The house was worse than the cameras showed. My office ransacked, drawers yanked out, papers everywhere like a tornado with selective taste. My passport gone. My fireproof safe, small, portable, containing deed documents and family heirlooms, missing. My laptop, cracked screen, wooden boot, deliberately broken. This wasn't inspection. This was robbery. I didn't touch anything, just backed out, gloved hands, and called the sheriff. Deputy Morrison arrived within an hour. Young guy, professional, body cam blinking. I showed him the damage. Played the security footage. Explained the HOA had 0 legal jurisdiction. My property sat outside their boundaries, confirmed by a 1993 court order. His eyes narrowed, watching Karen open my laptop. She had no legal right to enter? None. I have the property survey and court documents proving it. He didn't argue, just photographed everything, took my statement, said a detective would follow up, but as his taillights disappeared down the road, I felt doubt creeping in. What if the system protected her? What if HOA connections ran deeper than I thought? What if documentation wasn't enough? I'd spent 2 years living in this house peacefully. Now I might lose it to someone who thought a clipboard gave her ownership of my life. That fear, that crushing possibility of losing what Uncle Richard died protecting, kept me awake until dawn. The first letter from Karen had arrived 6 months ago. Soft blue envelope, cheerful font masking, condescension. Dear Mr. Bridger, as HOA president, I invite you to allow a voluntary exterior inspection of your property to ensure aesthetic continuity and shared community standards. I'd laughed. Actually, laughed. The HOA had no jurisdiction. Uncle Richard had fought that battle in the 80 seconds and won in court in 1993. I'd responded formally, certified mail, return receipt, attaching the court order and property survey. This property is not and has never been subject to Woodbrook Park HOA jurisdiction. Entry is not permitted under any circumstances. That should have ended it. 2 days later, a laminated notice appeared, zip-tied to my doorknob. Scheduled inspection notification. Your property will be assessed April 12 to PH for compliance. Faux legal language. Zero actual authority. She's baiting you, Julia had said. Seeing how far she can push? Maybe, but I wasn't the type to escalate without cause. So I did what Uncle Richard would have done. Got proactive. Installed 3 more cameras, 2 under eaves, 1 hidden in a flower box. Switched to battery backup with cloud alerts. If anyone approached, I'd know. Then came the Utah trip. 12 days hiking remote canyons. Complete disconnection. Perfect timing for Karen to make her move. And she had, but what she didn't know, my neighbor, Dora Benson, 67, former librarian, 2 rescue corgis, zero tolerance for bullshit, had recorded everything from across the street. When I called her that morning, her voice was pure fury. Tom, I got it all. Her walking in, the locksmith, the cops showing up, everything. The cops came? She called them. Told them you'd abandoned the property, that she had authorization. They didn't arrest her, but they didn't stop her either. Said it was complicated. Complicated. That word made my blood boil. There was nothing complicated about breaking and entering. Nothing complicated about theft. Unless you were Karen Hunt, and you'd spent years building a network of enablers who protected you, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd left evidence. And I was about to use every frame of it to destroy her. My first call was to Andrea Chen, attorney, former prosecutor, the kind of lawyer who smiles right before she eviscerates opposing counsel. Tom, this is... wow. She watched the footage 3 times. This is criminal. Breaking and entering. Theft. Fraud. She's done. What about the HOA? Can they claim some kind of authority? Not according to this. She held up the 1993 court order. This explicitly voids any HOA claim to your property. Whatever document she showed, that locksmith is either forged or intentionally misrepresented. So we sue? We bury her, civilly and criminally. But Tom, Andrea's expression shifted. People like Karen don't fight alone. She'll have resources, lawyers, maybe even political connections. This could get expensive. My construction company operated on thin margins. We had maybe $40,000 in savings. How expensive? If she fights, $50,000 in legal fees? Maybe more. I felt my chest tighten. But then I remembered Uncle Richard's voice. You protect what's yours. Do it, whatever it takes. Andrea smiled. Then let's start gathering ammunition. That afternoon, I installed 6 additional cameras covering every approach. Upgraded locks, set up motion sensor floods. If Karen tried again, I'd catch her. But I also did something smarter. I went on offense. First move, I drafted a cease and desist letter. So aggressive, Andrea had to tone it down twice. It detailed every violation, the break-in, the theft, the fraudulent use of an invalid 1987 document that had been nullified in 1993. It demanded immediate return of stolen property and $200,000 in damages. It promised criminal prosecution and civil litigation if compliance wasn't immediate. We sent it certified mail to Karen and every member of the HOA board. Second move. I reached out to neighbors. Not the HOA loyalists, the quiet ones. The people who'd been bullied into compliance for years. Dora was first. She'd already recorded the break-in and was furious. Then Jim Halford, ex-Marine, mid-50 seconds, cleanest driveway in the development. He'd always been distant, HOA aligned. He showed up at my door holding an envelope. "I don't agree with what she did," he said quietly. "Thought you should see this." Inside, an email from Karen to the board titled Future Integration Strategy, Enforcement Narrative. It laid out her plan to encourage compliance among non-member properties using escalated engagement, and C, controlled information release. It read like a CIA operation manual. "Why are you showing me this?" Jim's jaw tightened. "I believe in rules, but I don't believe in breaking into people's homes." She crossed a line. He left without another word. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Male voice. Quiet. Nervous. "Mr. Bridger, I'm on the HOA board. I can't talk long, but there are things you should know about Karen, about what she's really doing. When you get back, I'll contact you." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Someone on the inside wanted to talk, and Karen Hunt's empire was starting to crack. The crack widened 3 days later. I was installing the last camera when a silver SUV pulled up. Middle-aged man in khakis and a blazer stepped out, looking over his shoulder like someone might be watching. "Thomas Bridger? Depends. Who's asking?" "Martin Ellis, HOA treasurer. Or I was, until yesterday." He handed me a padded envelope. "You need to see this." Inside, printed emails, internal HOA memos, and a copy of the document Karen had shown the locksmith. At the top, proposed expansion plan, Woodbrook Park HOA, dated the 17th of May, 1987. Stamped at bottom, nullified by County Court Order 1993. "She knew," Martin said, voice low. "She knew it was invalid. But she's been waving it around for years, telling new board members it was pending reactivation. She even forged meeting minutes to make it look like the board voted to reassess external parcels. We didn't." I checked. "Why now? Why are you telling me this?" He looked genuinely shaken. "Because what she did to your house, that's criminal. She stole from you, and I've been covering for her lies for 3 years. I'm done." "What else has she done?" Martin pulled out a thumb drive. "Every board meeting she manipulated. Every email where she strong-armed people into compliance. Every forged document. I've been keeping backups. You've been waiting. I've been preparing." He got in his car. "Take her down, Mr. Bridger, because if you don't, she'll keep doing this to others." As he drove off, I held the envelope and flash drive, already building my case. But then my phone rang. Julia. "Tom, something's wrong. I got a call at work. Anonymous. Said I should convince my husband to drop this before things get worse for both of us." My hands went cold. "They threatened you?" "Not directly. But Tom, they knew where I work. They knew my schedule. This is escalating." After I hung up, I sat on the porch staring at Uncle Richard's house, the house he'd built, the house he'd protected, the house he'd made me promise to defend. Karen had crossed from property dispute into something darker. She was threatening my wife, and that changed everything. That night, I uploaded Martin's files to a secure drive and started going through them. What I found made my skin crawl. Karen Hunt wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. She was running a systematic campaign of intimidation against anyone who challenged her authority. Email from 2022, "Mr. Patterson's fence is technically compliant, but we should issue a violation anyway. Pressure tactics work." Email from 2023, "The Johnsons are behind on dues. Let's file a lien immediately. Send a message to others." Email from January 2024. External properties like Bridgers undermine our control. We need to establish presence before they become precedents. She'd been planning my house invasion for months, but there was more. Financial records showing Karen had used HOA funds for personal expenses, $15,000 in legal consulting that went to her brother-in-law's law firm for unrelated matters. She'd embezzled from the HOA while bullying residents into compliance. This wasn't just about my house anymore. This was about dismantling a tyrant. The next morning, I called Andrea. We have everything. Fraud, embezzlement, criminal trespass, theft. How fast can we move? Fast. I'll file tomorrow. But Tom, once this goes public, she's going to come at you with everything she has. Letter. I'm done playing defense. Andrea filed the complaint 2 days later. Civil suit against Woodbrook Park HOA and Karen Hunt, personally. Trespassing. Fraud. Invasion of privacy. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Theft. And misrepresentation of legal jurisdiction. Attached. The 1,993 court order, security footage, Martin's documents, financial records, witness statements from Dora and Jim. Karen's response came within 48 hours. Countersuit. Defamation, harassment, emotional distress caused by my campaign of hostility. Her attorney, some expensive HOA specialist, claimed I'd slandered Karen online and instigated unrest in the neighborhood, which was hilarious considering I hadn't posted anything publicly. But Karen was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. The mistake came 1 week before trial. I was working in my office when motion alerts started firing. 3 figures approaching the house, middle of the afternoon, bold as hell. I pulled up the feed. Karen Hunt, flanked by 2 men in suits, walking up my driveway like they had every right. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and stepped outside. Can I help you? Karen's smile was pure ice. Mr. Bridger, we're here to conduct a pretrial property assessment. Court ordered. Show me the order. She handed me papers. I scanned them, motion filed by her attorney, denied by the judge 3 days ago. This was denied. You're trespassing. That's a misunderstanding. We have authorization. You have nothing. Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff. One of the suits stepped forward. Sir, we're just trying to... I held up my phone, camera pointed at his face. You're being recorded. Everything you say is evidence. I suggest you walk away. They hesitated. Karen's expression shifted from confidence to something uglier. You think you've won? Her voice dropped. You think one lawsuit scares me? I have resources you can't imagine. Connections. I'll drag this out until you're bankrupt. And your wife, Julia, isn't it? Works at Patterson Design. Be a shame if her firm lost clients because of her husband's reputation. Everything went red. You threaten my wife again, and I will destroy you so completely they'll teach your case in law school as a warning. She smiled, looking forward to it. As they left, I sent the recording to Andrea. Her response? She just handed us the trial. See you in court. But that night, lying awake, I felt genuine fear. Not for myself, for Julia. For everything we'd built. Karen had shown she'd attack anything to win, and I had to make sure she failed. The trial opened on a cold October morning. County courthouse, packed gallery, local reporters, curious neighbors. Andrea laid out our case with surgical precision, security footage showing Karen entering my house. The 1,993 court order voiding HOA jurisdiction. Martin's documents proving Karen knew the 1,987 expansion plan was invalid. Financial records showing embezzlement. The locksmith, a kid named Jeremy, testified Karen told him she was dealing with an emergency, showed him fake documents, claimed it was her cousin's house. She said he had dementia and might be inside. I believed her. Then Dora took the stand, showed her video, Karen dismissing her warnings, police arriving, Karen lying about authorization. The courtroom went silent. Karen's attorney tried the classic defense. The HOA acted in good faith based on reasonable belief of responsibility for neighborhood cohesion. Andrea smiled like a shark. If this was good faith, why are there forged meeting minutes? Why did Miss Hunt lie to a locksmith? Why did she threaten my client's wife? She played the recording from my driveway. Karen's voice. I'll drag this out until you're bankrupt. Be a shame if her firm lost clients. The judge's expression hardened. When Martin testified about the financial irregularities, 3 board members in the gallery stood up and walked out. Karen sat stone-faced, hands folded, but I could see the tremor. Her empire was collapsing in real time. The jury took 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge leaned forward. Miss Hunt, you orchestrated a campaign of fraud, theft, and intimidation. This wasn't enforcement, it was a personal crusade. I'm awarding Mr. Bridger $185,000 in damages. Additionally, I'm referring your actions to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Karen tried to leave quickly, but reporters caught her outside. Face flushed, envelope clutched like a shield. The photo made the paper next morning. HOA president faces defeat. Power trip ends in collapse. Julia squeezed my hand as we left the courthouse. It's over. Yeah, finally. But I knew the real work was just beginning. Within a week, Karen resigned. Officially, health reasons. Unofficially, cornered in a coffee shop by angry residents demanding answers. Her house went up for sale within a month. The HOA board called emergency elections. New leadership. Dora ran on a platform of less power, more peace, and won by a landslide. Her first action, bylaw explicitly banning entry to non-HOA properties under any circumstances. As for me, I replaced the front gate with reinforced steel, voice-activated, solar-powered, custom sign bolted to the fence, private property, no A-way access ever. One afternoon, a teenager on a bike tossed a flyer over the gate. Join our friendly HOA. The automated voice-eyed program kicked in. Notice, you are on private property. This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. Your presence is being recorded. Have a wonderful day. I grinned. Dora's idea. Standing on my porch, looking at Uncle Richard's house, my house, I remembered his last words. You protect what's yours. I had. And I'd made damn sure the next person who tried what Karen did would think twice, then turn around. The end. The days after discovering the break-in felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every morning I'd wake up at 4 a.m., mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd jolt expecting lawyers, threats, more violations of my space, and sanity. Julia moved back in after 3 days at her sister's, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She'd catch me staring at security footage for the 100th time and just shake her head. Tom, you need to sleep. I need to make sure they don't come back. They won't. You've got cameras everywhere. Motion sensors. Andrea's already filed. They already broke in once. They threatened you. They stole my passport and my grandfather's safe. You think a lawsuit stops people like that? She didn't have an answer, because we both knew Karen Hunt wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. The week before the cease and desist letter arrived at her door, I spent every evening going through Martin's files like an archaeologist excavating a crime scene. What I found wasn't just evidence of my case, it was a pattern, a system, a years-long campaign of manipulation that made my break-in look like the tip of an iceberg. Email chain from March 2022. Karen to board. The Patterson family's fence technically meets height requirements, but the color is natural wood instead of white. I recommend we issue a violation notice. Sometimes, pressure tactics are more effective than actual enforcement. Board member reply, but the bylaws don't specify color. The bylaws say aesthetically consistent. That's our discretion. Trust me, once we establish precedent, compliance becomes easier. They'd issued the violation. The Pattersons had repainted their fence white within 2 weeks, spending $1,200 they shouldn't have had to spend. Email from July 2023. Karen to board. The Johnsons are 2 months behind on HOA dues, $240 total. I recommend we file a lien on their property immediately. It sends a message to other residents about consequences. Treasurer Martin Ellis. That seems extreme. Standard practice is 90 days before lien filing. Standard practice is what I say it is. File the lien or I'll find a treasurer who will. The Johnsons had paid within a week plus $500 in legal fees and penalties. Email from January 2024. Karen to board. The Bridger property continues to undermine our authority. External properties that refuse HOA integration create precedents we can't afford. I'm exploring options for establishing physical presence on the property to document violations. Board member, but it's outside our jurisdiction. Karen, there are ways to create jurisdiction. Leave that to me. She'd been planning the invasion for 8 months. Methodically. Deliberately. With full knowledge, it was illegal. But what chilled me most was the financial data Martin had included. From 2022 to 2024, Karen had authorized $37,000 in legal consulting fees paid to Hunt and Associates, her brother-in-law's law firm. The services listed general HOA legal guidance. The actual work, 0 documented correspondence, 0 legal memos, 0 billable hours showing what that $37,000 had purchased. It was embezzlement, dressed up as professional fees, and every resident's HOA dues had funded it. The night I finished going through the files, I called Andrea. This isn't just about my house anymore. This is RICO-level corruption. Tom, I know you're angry, but let's be strategic. We focus on your case, trespass, theft, fraud. The embezzlement is ammunition, but it's not your primary fight. Why not? She's stealing from everyone. Because if you make this about HOA financial corruption, you become the crusader going after community funds. That's a harder sell to a jury. But if you're the homeowner whose privacy was violated, whose property was stolen, whose wife was threatened, that's a story everyone understands. She was right. I hated that she was right. But strategy mattered more than righteousness. So we used the embezzlement as character evidence. Shows she's desperate for money, for control, for power. Shows she's willing to break laws to maintain her empire. Exactly. Now get some sleep. You look like hell. I didn't sleep. Instead, I drove out to the cemetery where Uncle Richard was buried. It was nearly midnight when I pulled up to the small plot under the oak tree he'd loved. The stone was simple. Richard Thomas Bridger, 1943 to 2022. Builder, fighter, free man. I sat on the grass, back against the headstone, and remembered the last conversation we'd had. He'd been in the hospital for 3 weeks. Cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him days. I'd driven down from Charlotte, sat beside his bed, watching machines beep and tubes deliver morphine he didn't want but needed. Tommy. His voice was gravel and smoke. You listening? I'm here, Uncle Richard. That house. The one I'm leaving you. It's more than just a building. I know. No, you don't. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. That house is freedom, you understand? I built every wall, wired every socket, plumbed every pipe. Nobody told me how to do it. Nobody charged me HOA fees for the privilege of living in my own damn house. He coughed, wet, rattling. I handed him water. They tried, you know. The HOA came at me in '87 with some bullshit expansion plan. Said my property fell within their aesthetic jurisdiction. I told them to get fucked. Took them to court. Won in '93. I saw the documents. Good. Keep those safe, because they'll come for you too. His eyes locked on mine. That's how these people work. They can't stand anyone living outside their control. Makes them feel small, so they'll use rules, lawyers, fake authority, anything to force you into compliance. I can handle I need you to promise me, Tommy. His grip tightened. You protect that house. Not because it's valuable, it's probably worth less than I spent building it, but because it's yours. Because Bridgers don't quit on what matters. Promise me. I'd looked at this stubborn, proud, impossible man who'd taught me that freedom was worth fighting for. I promise, Uncle Richard. He'd smiled, released my wrist. Good. Because they're counting on you to be weak. Don't give them the satisfaction. He died 6 days later. Sitting at his grave now, feeling dew soak through my jeans, I whispered, "She broke into the house, stole your documents, violated everything you built." The wind rustled through oak leaves, but I'm keeping the promise. I'm fighting, and I'm going to win. I drove home as dawn broke over North Carolina hills, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Certainty. Karen Hunt thought she was dismantling me, but she was actually giving me every weapon I needed to destroy her. The cease and desist letter hit like a bomb. I knew because Dora called me 30 minutes after it was delivered. "Tom, you magnificent bastard." Karen just opened her mail, read for about 10 seconds, then screamed, loud enough I heard it from across the street. Good. She's on her porch right now, pacing, talking on her phone. Looks like she's about to have a stroke. Even better. What I didn't expect, Karen showing up at my house 3 hours later, not with lawyers or HOA lackeys, alone. She parked her white Lexus in my driveway, bold. Considering the cease and desist explicitly forbade her from coming within 100 feet of my property and walked up to my porch like she owned the place. I stepped outside before she could knock. "You're trespassing." Again. She held up the letter, hand shaking. "This is insane. You're accusing me of the theft? Of fraud?" I was performing my duties as, "You broke into my house, on camera, stole my passport and a fireproof safe, damaged my laptop, all while I was 2,000 miles away. I had authorization. You had a document from 1987 that was nullified in 1993. That's not authorization. That's fraud." Her face went red. "You think you can intimidate ME? You think some letter from a two-bit lawyer scares me? I have resources you can't imagine. Connections in this county that'll bury you before you even get off my property. Now. Or what? You'll call the cops? They know me, Tom. They know I'm trying to maintain community standards, while you sit in your uncle's weird-ass house thumbing your nose at everyone who's trying to build something nice here. Build something nice? You're embezzling HOA funds. I have the financial records." That stopped her. For maybe 3 seconds, her confident mask slipped. Then it snapped back. "That's a lie. Defamation. I'll add it to my countersuit and take everything you have." Looking forward to it, she turned, stomped back to her Lexus, but paused at the driver's door. "Your wife, Julia, works at Patterson Design, right?" Everything inside me went cold. Leave her out of this. Just saying it'd be a shame if her firm lost clients because her husband has a reputation for making wild accusations. Businesses care about that stuff, especially when partners get complicated. "You threaten my wife again, and I will END you," she smiled. Actually smiled, looking forward to that too. As she drove off, I pulled out my phone. The entire conversation, recorded, including the threat against Julia. I sent it to Andrea with one message. She just buried herself. Andrea's reply came 10 seconds later. "Holy shit. This wins the trial. See you in court." But that night, I couldn't sleep. Because Karen had shown her hand, she'd attacked Julia to get to me, and I had to make absolutely certain she failed. The next morning, I drove to Patterson Design, the architecture firm where Julia worked as a project manager, found her in the break room, coffee in hand, looking exhausted. "Tom, what are you doing here? We need to talk. Privately." In the parking lot, I played her the recording, watched her face go from confused to furious. "She threatened my JOB? She's desperate. Andrea says we're winning, so she's lashing out. Tom, I can't lose this job. We have mortgage payments, legal fees. If she actually contacts my boss, she won't. Because if she does, it's witness intimidation. Andrea can add it to the charges, criminal charges. Julia sat on the hood of her car, head in hands. I hate this. I hate that she's invaded our home, our lives, our work. I hate that we're spending money we don't have fighting someone who should have just left us alone. I sat beside her. I know, but we're close. Trial's in 2 weeks. We have everything, footage, documents, witnesses, her own threats on tape. She's done. What if she's not? What if she has connections we don't know about? What if the judge is friends with someone on the HOA board? What if then we fight anyway? Because Uncle Richard didn't quit, and neither do we. She leaned against me. I miss when our biggest problem was deciding what color to paint the shutters. Yeah, me too. But sitting there in that parking lot, I made a decision. If Karen went after Julia's job, I'd make sure the counterattack was so devastating she'd regret ever hearing the name Bridger. The week before trial, strange things started happening. I got a letter from the county zoning office claiming my property had unauthorized structures requiring immediate inspection. I called them. They had no record of sending the letter. Tuesday. 3 code enforcement vehicles showed up claiming noise complaints about construction activity. I hadn't done any construction in months. Wednesday. My business email got flooded with spam. Hundreds of messages from fake addresses, overwhelming my inbox and making it nearly impossible to find actual client communications. Thursday. Someone left a dead possum on my porch. Just left it there, like a mob movie. Dora caught it on her camera, a dark sedan, no plates visible, someone in a hood dropping the carcass and driving off at 3 a.m. I got a call from my bank. Someone had attempted to access my accounts using my social security number. The fraud was flagged, but it rattled me. Every single incident, untraceable, deniable, designed to harass and intimidate. I documented everything, gave it all to Andrea. This is a pattern, she said. Systematic harassment. We add it to the filing. Will it matter? It shows consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't wage campaigns of intimidation. Criminals do. But sitting alone in my house that Friday night, security cameras showing nothing but empty driveway, I felt the weight of it all crushing down. What if we were wrong? What if Karen really did have connections that protected her? What if the system was too corrupt to deliver justice? What if I lost Uncle Richard's house because I couldn't fight hard enough? That fear, that crushing, suffocating possibility kept me awake until dawn and made me realize the low point wasn't the break-in, it was now. The moment before trial when everything hung in balance and I didn't know if fighting would be enough. But Uncle Richard's voice echoed in my head. They're counting on you to be weak. Don't give them the satisfaction. So I didn't. I got up, made coffee, and prepared for war. The trial opened on October 14th. Cold morning. Leaves turning gold and rust across the courthouse lawn. Andrea met me on the steps, briefcase in hand, wearing her destroy opposing counsel expression. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be. Good, because Karen just showed up with 3 attorneys. I looked across the lot. Karen stepping out of a black Mercedes, flanked by lawyers in expensive suits. She'd brought the big guns. Doesn't matter, Andrea said. We have truth. And in this courthouse, truth tends to win. Inside, the gallery was packed. Dora and Jim sat in the front row. Martin Ellis near the back, nervous but present. Neighbors I barely knew. Local reporters with notebooks. And Julia, sitting right behind the plaintiff's table where I could see her. The judge entered. Margaret Holloway. Late 60 seconds. Former prosecutor. Reputation for zero tolerance for bullshit. Karen's lead attorney opened with classic misdirection. Your Honor, this case represents a tragic misunderstanding between a concerned HOA president trying to maintain community standards and a homeowner who's weaponized litigation to avoid reasonable compliance. Andrea stood. Your Honor, this case represents breaking and entering, theft, fraud, and witness intimidation. We have video evidence, financial records, and the defendant's own threats on tape. Judge Holloway looked at Karen. Miss Hunt, Did you or did you not enter Mr. Bridger's property without permission? I had authorization based on historical. Did you enter his property? Long pause. Yes. But. We'll address the but with evidence. Continue, miss. Chen. Andrea played the security footage. All 17 minutes. Karen walking through my house like a realtor at an open house. Opening drawers. Photographing documents. Opening my laptop. The courtroom went silent. Then Andrea played the recording from my driveway. Karen threatening Julia's job. Several jurors sat forward. Then came the witnesses. Jeremy the locksmith. She told me it was her cousin's house, that he had dementia. I believed her. I warned her she was trespassing. She told me to mind my own business. Jim Halford, I've served on the HOA board for 6 years. We never voted to authorize entry to external properties. Ever. Karen manipulated board records, forged meeting minutes, and embezzled $37,000 in HOA funds through fake consulting contracts. Karen's attorneys objected repeatedly, argued context, claimed misunderstanding, but the evidence was undeniable. Andrea's closing argument was surgical. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about HOA rules or community standards. This is about a woman who believed her title gave her ownership of other people's lives and property, who broke laws, stole property, threatened families, and when caught, doubled down with intimidation and fraud. She held up the 1,993 court order. This document explicitly voids any HOA claim to Mr. Bridger's property. Karen Hunt knew this. She used a defunct 1,987 proposal to lie to a locksmith, invade a home, and steal personal property. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a woman in her 60s, read the verdict with visible satisfaction. On the count of trespassing, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of theft, guilty. On the count of fraud, guilty. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress, guilty. Karen sat motionless, but I saw her hands trembling. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Miss Hunt, you orchestrated a campaign of illegal entry, theft, and intimidation. This wasn't HOA enforcement. It was criminal behavior dressed in bureaucratic language. I'm awarding Mr. Bridger $185,000 in damages and referring your actions to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The gavel hit like thunder. As they led Karen out face flushed, clutching her briefcase, I felt something break open in my chest. Relief, vindication, justice. Julia grabbed my hand. You did it. We did it. Outside, reporters swarmed. I kept it simple. I just wanted to protect what my uncle built, and I'm grateful the system worked. But walking to the car, I thought about Uncle Richard's promise, about the house he'd built brick by brick, about freedom being worth fighting for. And I realized this was always bigger than just property. It was about refusing to let bullies win, about standing your ground even when the system seemed stacked against you, about keeping promises to the people who taught you what integrity meant. Within a week, Karen resigned from the HOA. Her house went up for sale. The district attorney's investigation found grounds for criminal fraud charges. She pled out community service, probation, permanent ban from any HOA position in North Carolina. The HOA elected new leadership. Dora won the presidency. Her first action, bylaw prohibiting entry to non-member properties under any circumstances. As for me, I replaced the front gate with reinforced steel, voice activated, solar powered, with a custom sign, private property, no HOA access ever. One Saturday afternoon, a teenager on a bike tossed an HOA recruitment flyer over my gate. The automated message kicked in. Notice, you are on private property. This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. Your presence is being recorded. Have a wonderful day. I laughed. Uncle Richard would have loved that. Standing on the porch of his house, my house, looking at the green metal siding and double-gabled roof, I felt something settle. This wasn't just a building. It was legacy, independence, freedom, and I'd protected it, just like I promised. The absolute end. 6 months later, I was sitting on my porch when a moving truck pulled up across the street. New neighbors, young couple, maybe early 30s, unloading boxes with that exhausted determination of people who just closed on their first house. The woman spotted me and waved. I waved back. 10 minutes later, she walked over carrying what looked like cookies on a paper plate. "Hi, I'm Sarah. We just moved in. Thought I'd introduce myself. Tom Bridger. Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks. This place seems nice." Quiet. We were worried about HOA restrictions. Our last neighborhood was insane, but the new board president, Dora, she was super helpful, said things have really changed around here. I smiled. Yeah, things definitely changed. Anyway, she glanced at my gate, at the cameras, at the very obvious NOAOA access sign. That's quite a security setup. Had some trouble a while back, took care of it. HOA trouble? You could say that. She laughed nervously. Well, Dora assured us the new board is nothing like the old president. Apparently, she was intense? That's one word for it. Sarah handed me the cookies. Well, if you ever want to share horror stories over coffee, let me know. I've got some doozies from our last place. After she left, I ate a cookie and thought about how far we'd come. The house no longer felt like a fortress under siege. It felt like home again. Julia had started gardening in the side yard. Tomatoes, herbs, flowers. Uncle Richard would have loved. Dora's corgis still visited daily, treating my porch like their personal territory. The automated gate voice had become a neighborhood joke. Kids would bike past just to trigger it and laugh at the recording. And every morning, I'd walk outside and see Uncle Richard's house standing exactly as he'd built it. Tall, angular, stubbornly independent. A monument to the idea that some things are worth fighting for. That evening, Julia and I sat on the porch, watching sunset paint the North Carolina sky in shades of orange and purple. "You ever think about what would have happened if you'd just let her win?" Julia asked. "If you'd said it's not worth the fight and walked away?" I thought about Uncle Richard in that hospital bed, about his rough hands gripping mine, about the promise I'd made. No, because some promises you don't break, and some fights you don't walk away from. Even when it costs everything? Especially then. She leaned against me. You know what's funny? Karen thought she was powerful. Thought her title and her lawyers and her connections made her untouchable. Yeah, but in the end, she lost everything. And you kept the one thing that mattered. I looked at the house, at the green siding that still looked good after 50 years, at the double gables Uncle Richard had designed himself, at the porch where we sat watching the world go by. Not just the house, I said. The principle, the freedom, the refusal to let anyone tell me how to live on my own property. Your uncle would be proud. I hope so. That night, I walked down to the tool shed, the one Uncle Richard had built with leftover lumber and pure stubbornness. On the wall, still hanging where he'd left it, was a handmade sign he'd carved in the 1,980 seconds after winning his first battle against the HOA. Freedom isn't free, but it's worth every fight. I ran my fingers over the carved letters, feeling the grain of wood he'd shaped with his own hands, and I understood. This was never just about property rights or legal battles or defeating a bully. It was about understanding that some things, integrity, independence, the right to live without someone else's approval, are worth defending at any cost. Karen Hunt had learned that the hard way, and anyone else who tried to take what was mine would learn it too. I walked back to the house where Julia was waiting, the porch light warm and welcoming, the gate locked, and the cameras watching. My house, my land, my freedom, protected, defended, kept, just like I promised. The true end.